PLC is urged to make extra measures to deter Houthis. International observers stress the need to return truce in Yemen amid global food and energy crisis. Hodeidah hosts big event on eliminating gender-based violence against women. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Shaza Abdelbey. Head of the PLC Rashad Al Alimi and King of Jordan discussed in Amman developments in the Yemeni situation. The talks touch on the security of the region in light of the terrorist activities by the Houthi militia. The two sides also reviewed areas of cooperation between the two countries and the Jordanian support of various levels. Foreign Minister Ahmed bin Mubarak affirmed the government is making more measures in terms of classifying the Houthis as a terrorist group. In the meeting with the U.S. ambassador to Yemen, bin Mubarak urged the international community to support the Yemenis to control the Houthi violence. Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council is urged to make more practical measures to protect Yemenis and infrastructure from the Houthi attacks. This report has more details.
Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council said that it will implement deterrent punitive measures against the Iran-backed Houthi militia in response to its terrorist escalation. It held the militia fully responsible for the consequences of their attacks on life-saving humanitarian supplies. PLC Chairman Dr. Rashad Al Alimi convened the virtual council meeting that tackled ongoing efforts to take measures to stop Houthi terrorism and attacks against oil export ports. Yemeni sources said the meeting discussed local developments and structural reforms at sovereign agencies. It also tackled government measures to implement National Defense Council resolution related to the classification of the Houthi militia as a terrorist group. The Council discussed proposals to strengthen the role of agencies concerned with combating terrorism, deterring Houthi attacks on infrastructure and economic facilities, and threats to international peace and security. The Presidential Leadership Council stressed its commitment to defending national sovereign interests and facilities, securing basic services and livelihoods, and limiting the repercussions of the systematic terrorist targeting of the oil sector and civilian facilities. Meanwhile, Yemeni Foreign Minister Ahmed Awad bin Mubarak discussed with the U.S. Ambassador to Yemen, Stephen Fagan, the developments in Yemen and the repercussions of the continued terrorist Houthi attacks on ships and economic and oil installations. They discussed the difficulties in beating peace efforts in Yemen in wake of the Houthi escalation and their threat to international navigation and international peace and security. Bin Mubarak said that the government is proceeding with the procedures to implement the decision to designate the Houthi militia as a terrorist organization. He highlighted the importance of the international community's support for the decision to help contain the Houthi threat. For his part, the U.S. ambassador renewed his country's condemnation of the Houthi terrorist attacks on oil facilities, stressing his country's support for the security, stability, and unity of Yemen.
International experts call on the warring parties to revive the truce efforts. They said that the truce is important, especially with the aggravation of food and energy crisis across the world. This report has more details.
Yemen awaits signs that a truce involving all main factions can hold, despite a failure to renew in October. The truce is absolutely vital for those living in Yemen and who are left to grapple with a cascading set of dire daily realities. The failure to achieve peace and restore the national unity throughout the country is the main hurdle to peace and development in Yemen. Rising global oil prices have given the Houthis and their backers in Iran more cause to block solution in Yemen, as the seas around the country's coast are the main route for energy exportation to Europe, and the Houthis are trying to take advantage of this point. Escalation along the route is obviously something that European countries are very alert to, and the regimes hostile to the West are just as alert to the advantages of disruption of those corridors. Iranian efforts to have another cause to launch attacks on the tankers leaving to Europe are holding Yemen hostage. This, for Iranian leadership, is a potential pinch point that would allow Tehran to exercise pressure through escalation. The Houthis collect illegal fees and levies, especially from oil and communications, also confiscating the assets and funds of individuals and entities. Pressure is piling as well, for there are more than 3 million refugees and more than 1 million that have come from Africa. Experts see that the benefits of war are evident for a man who has a gun and controls the checkpoints and can extract taxes and has more power over people than perhaps he has ever had in his life. So, what is the incentive to that individual to bring an end to the war?
The Houthi militia shelled populated villages south of Hodeidah. Local sources reported that the Houthis targeted one village in Hais. The sources pointed out that the shelling caused panic among the people, especially children and women. In the meantime, the joint forces repelled the Houthi fires in the area. In Lahj, Houthis launched attacks on government military sites in the city. According to a government media, violent battles broke out between the forces and the Houthis in Al-Hazm and other areas in which various types of weapons were used. The Houthi militia admitted the death of 9 of its leaders in clashes with the government forces. Sources indicated that the Houthi militia conducted many funerals for the dead in many governorates. In Hodeidah, a celebration was organized for International Day for the elimination of gender-based violence against women. This report has more details.
In Hodeidah, the 4 Human Development Foundation's Safe Space for Women and Girls in Al-Khawkha district hosted an event to commemorate the International Day Against Gender-Based Violence, which is a global campaign that begins on November 25th and lasts for 16 days.
Today, the For Human Foundation has established a bazaar for women to display their products. Thanks to the organization's efforts, women in the Khawkha district were able to support their families and gain leadership of their households.
The event began with an entertaining cultural ceremony commemorating the 16-day campaign against violence, and a bazaar was held for the products of the beneficiaries of training, rehabilitation, and economic empowerment in the United Nations-funded protection and livelihood support projects. Livelihood grant bags were distributed to 13 beneficiaries in the field of sewing and knitting, as well as in the field of mobile maintenance, which will enable them to enhance their capabilities and skills in all areas of work, to find sources of daily income for themselves and their families, and to alleviate the suffering of destitution.
We offer a range of workshops in the field of sewing, knitting, mobile maintenance, perfumery, henna, and other services, which aim to empower women economically and financially.
Yemen, the poorest country in the Arab States region, is experiencing a complex war and humanitarian crisis. According to the UN, over 76% of Yemenis are in need of humanitarian assistance. The situation of women and girls in Yemen is very challenging. Conflict has added layers of vulnerability for women and girls and exacerbated existing gender inequalities.
The National Committee to investigate allegations of human rights violations met with the ambassador of diplomatic missions to review the human rights situation in Yemen. The meeting discussed the recent field investigation work carried out by the committee in all governorates and the number of cases that were documented. The Yemeni Journalist Syndicate and the International Federation of Journalists conducted in Aden a training course on professional safety for journalists. The participant applied knowledge about safety and the process of good planning for media missions in conflict areas. Coming next in the news. Yemen's great poet and thinker Dr. Abdulaziz Al-Makalih dies in Sana'a at the age of 84.
نشن ندي ماء من الغيل والغيلة بعيد، كنا ندي بالدواب نعبي ماء وترجعنا. كنا ننزل الساعة 5 رجعنا الساعة 9.
ما يقلنا ظهر لأنه زحمة ما حد يخلي الجهل يغرق وإحنا تعبنا زيادة.
وكنت أحس صدري يوجعني وعز قدرك ركبي يوجعيني.
كنا ما نستخدم حتى نغسل أولادنا إلا يعني بأيام معدودة.
كنت أغيب على المدرسة لأن كنت أروح الديمة.
حتى وإن كان يجي الأمطار تروح هدر لأنه ما في معي خزانة.
الوقت نشتري ب30,000 هي معها استهلاك ما يغلقش معها الشهر.
لا تروح تطلب الله ولا أي حاجة، عامله كل شغلك على الماء.
Welcome back. The first shipment of new oil derivatives grant provided by Saudi Arabia arrived at the port of Mukalla in Hadramaut. The shipment contains more than 8,000 metric tons of fuel intended for power stations in Hadramaut. Yemeni government signed a deal with the Arab Monetary Fund to receive $1 billion of economic aid. This report has more details.
According to Yemeni and Saudi official media, the Arab Monetary Fund has inked a $1 billion deal to promote Yemen's economic reform agenda under the government. The latest package from the Abu Dhabi-based fund will boost the Yemeni government's attempts to stabilize the economy from 2022 to 2025. Yemen's economy has been crippled by a civil conflict that began in late 2014, when Iran-backed Houthi rebels invaded the capital Sana'a, resulting in the world's greatest humanitarian crisis. Food, water, and gasoline have become costly for the majority, which imports most of its needs due to inflation and currency shortages. Millions of Yemenis have been displaced as a result of the conflict, and a large portion of the population relies on international aid to live. While the Yemeni rial has remained largely stable in Houthi-controlled areas, it has reached all-time lows in government-controlled provinces. On Sunday, $1 was being exchanged for more than 1,000 rials in the southern port city of Aden, which serves as the government's temporary base. After 2014, Yemen's central bank was divided into two branches, one in Sana'a, controlled by the Houthis, and one internationally recognized branch in Aden, controlled by the government and with access to money printers. The Yemeni foreign minister accused the Houthis of attacking the government's economic resources after a series of Houthi raids on oil ports and infrastructure this month. This is a severe escalation by the Houthis, and the effects of such strikes will have a devastating impact on the Yemeni people. The strikes came after the Houthis rejected UN efforts to extend and widen a 6-month ceasefire in early October. Saudi Arabia said in April that it will provide $3 billion in economic assistance to the war-torn country following the formation of a new presidential council. It was unclear whether the entire amount had been distributed.
Honey industry has worsened due to the war and hard economic conditions. Yemeni beekeepers continue to bear the brunt of the economic situation as it impacted their businesses. This report has more details.
Beekeepers in Al Sabiha areas face great difficulties in order to obtain honey in a profession that has become very challenging in light of the current circumstances, especially among young beekeepers who have few beehives, which causes them to lose some cells in search of pastures that are absent during some months in their areas.
Beekeeping is considered the only source of income for us, but it is exposed most of the times to poisoning, especially in Hodeidah. We lost more than 100 beehives due to poisoning and transportation challenges. One sugar bag is now worth 50,000 rials.
At the beginning of this month, The beekeepers finish the season of harvesting cedar honey, which enjoys the best and the highest value in the region, after which the stage of transporting it to areas that achieve the yield for beekeepers begins. But the high coast and rough roads exacerbate the loss of some beehives in the journey.
Now the season of honey harvesting has ended in November, and in February we will start a new season, as cedar honey is worthy, but it's suffered deficiency because of the lack of bees, and we cannot transport them to other locations.
In search of healing and livelihood, many beekeepers in al-Sabiha areas spend their daily lives in the hope of obtaining honeydew, which requires great effort in a journey entitled to bringing healing and earning money, as it is the main source of livelihood for some families who work in beekeeping.
Abdulaziz al-Makalih, the Yemeni writer and poet, died in the capital Sana'a after a long struggle with diseases at the age of 84. He was born in 1937 in a village in Ib. He was the first president of Sana'a University, and his works are widely read in the Arab world. Here's a reminder of the main headlines. PLC is urged to make extra measures to deter Houthis. International observers stress the need to return truce in Yemen amid global food and energy crisis. Hodeidah hosts big event on eliminating gender-based violence against women. This is the end of the news. Thank you for watching.